Hello guys and welcome back. Today we're going to watch a video from Mark Manson and the title is Why You Feel So Lost. And I will give you my input to the situation and let's see what's going on in this video.
And a man cannot get out of bed. He suffers from what today would be diagnosed as clinical depression, and he has struggled with it on and off throughout his life. But this time, the void is unbearable. He refuses to eat most days, and when his family does bring him food, they intentionally don't bring a knife for fear of his safety. And for what it's worth.
So in today's situation, you can look in the world, many people have what's called high functioning depression. You know, you feel that something is wrong, but you still have to go to work and still do what's expected of you. Otherwise, you can lose everything. So, yeah, it's harsh.
The man actually had a lot to be depressed about. His son had just died, his wife is estranged, his job is going absolutely horribly. Everybody hates him and is calling for his resignation. Society itself seems to be collapsing all around him, and somehow it feels like it's his fault. This man, of course, is Abraham Lincoln. Now, the funny thing about feeling lost is that...
So you see, many people think that depression happens only to quote-unquote losers, to people who are poor, or etc, etc, etc. But reality is that it can happen to everyone. So it's not that something is wrong with you, it's not that you're broken, but it's life, you know. And our mind is just like a muscle. If we train it, it becomes stronger and we can beat all kinds of things and suffering.
That it doesn't always actually reflect if we're lost or not. Like a child who takes a wrong turn going home and suddenly feeling like they're in a different world, sometimes if we simply backtrack a couple steps, everything can feel right again. In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 stories of when some of the most brilliant minds in history felt completely lost and what you can learn from them. But this isn't just a poetic riff on the feeling of being lost in life and how to get back on track, because trust me, it's fucking hard to deal with. I want to go further than that.
Yeah, and I have also experienced that many times in my life and have bounced back. And that's why it's important to get these tools, because if you have ever felt this way, it's safe to assume that it's going to happen again. So the question is not whether or not it will happen, but the question is when it's going to happen. And when it happens, you have the power with tools like CBT to conquer that. So it's a daily practice, like showering, etc, etc, etc. But the strongest it becomes when you start to change your beliefs. That's when magic happens.
Because I want to argue that not only is feeling lost normal, but it is, to some extent, kind of healthy. Let me explain. In 1909, Carl Jung had finally built the life he'd always dreamed of. He'd fought his way through medical school to become the most renowned psychoanalyst in Zurich. And as Sigmund...
So, one important thing. Success does not equal happiness. Success is success. Happiness is happiness. It's not the same. Why interchange those words? Why? Because society is scamming us that this is how you are supposed to feel when you are quote-unquote successful.
And Freud's chosen successor, Jung stood at the very center of the new field of psychology. Carl Jung was Sigmund Freud's protege. Both men were extremely attached to one another. Jung stated publicly that he saw Freud as the closest thing to a father in his life. Freud sometimes referred to Jung as his adopted son. The problem was that Jung couldn't quite get on board with Freud's wackier theory.
These pictures seems like photoshopped.
Especially around sexual repression, which, I mean, who can blame him? And Freud had achieved a kind of demigod status in the field of psychology. He didn't really like being openly challenged, especially by the people close to him. I liked him very much, Jung later said, but I soon discovered that when he had thoughts on things, then it was settled, while I was doubting all along the line. In 1913, the relationship broke.
So Jung was experimenting with stuff, and Freud said that it is like that and you cannot challenge that view.
Jung published a book that challenged some of Freud's core ideas, and Freud, well, he took this personally.
Yeah, he didn't
Freud
like it.
turned on him. And not with some passive-aggressive avoidance, he actually tried to erase him, to cut him off from the psychoanalytic movement he helped build. In effect, the man who was once his mentor and father figure now became his fiercest critic, his enemy. Jung lost his mentor, his father figure, his work community, his reputation, and most of his friends. The meaning that had structured his entire life had shattered overnight, and what followed was a slow descent into what Jung himself called a creative madness. He withdrew from the world. He filled page after page of his journals with wild, often incoherent thoughts. He built tiny castles out of pebbles by the
Maybe it's where the Red Book comes from his unconscious. That's an interesting idea that we're probably going to study in the future.
lake, and he wandered aimlessly through the woods, holding conversations with his imaginary friends. Now, if you're feeling lost, you're not adrift because your life is meaningless, you're adrift because the meaning you had no longer fits. Like Jung, the narrative that you based all of your meaning and identity around is broken. And that just means that a new narrative must be written. And that rewriting is a creative process. It's a creative exploration.
So we can decide who we want to be, and sometimes we can create these things from our identity. So it's identity, thoughts, feelings, action. It's not actions, thoughts, feelings, identity, but we can also create identities, and we have seen that actually through David Goggins. We're going to do an episode that too.
And it takes time. But here's where Jung's spiral became his salvation. He didn't run from that darkness. He actually sat with it, in the place where old meaning is dead and no new one had yet emerged. In effect, he let that terrifying void teach him who he really was. He spent years psychoanalyzing himself, digging down to the roots of his values, his needs and desires. And that's the lesson, that growth will feel like death before it becomes rebirth. When the story stops making sense.
So sometimes progress feels not linear, or it's not like jumping to greatness, but it's a slow building, like doing every day, changing your beliefs day by day, and you feel still lost, and you feel that you're not doing enough, and blah 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 blah. But then all of the sudden you wake up, like in 1 month, 3 months, 100 days, and you feel something is different. You feel that things have changed, that you have changed.
Don't rush to patch the hole with cheap distractions. Instead, confront that empty space between stories. Make a home in the void for a little while. Little castles made of pebbles. And in time, the new narrative will begin to take shape. As Jung called it, without that confrontation with the unconscious, there was no transformation. So if the story of your life has stopped making sense, maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's your invitation to step into another blank page.
Maybe it's
where
just
the
the
old
beginning.
meaning dies so something more real can take its place. This is something that our next historical figure never did, and he almost paid the ultimate price. In 1912, after 2 terms as president, Theodore Roosevelt wasn't content to fade into the history books. He wasn't wired that way. This was a man who at just 42 had already been a cowboy, a soldier, a police commissioner, a governor, and a war hero. This is a dude who got shot while giving a speech and then got up and finished the speech. So when he decided to make a political comeback and run as a third-party candidate, it seemed obvious that people would rally around him. I mean, if anybody could make this work, it was Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, it would be
This
him.
is the guy that they named the fucking teddy bear after. This is the guy on Mount Rushmore next to Washington and Lincoln.
So you see, everything comes from within. Nothing comes from without.
Of course they're gonna vote for him. But they didn't. He lost. And not only did he lose, he was humiliated. Overnight, the great force of nature, the bull moose himself, became a historical footnote. He went from being the center of gravity in all of American life to basically obsolete. And this led to many sleepless nights. Theodore Roosevelt did not handle it well. And his tossing and turning was a symptom of a deep psychological wound, one that affected his entire sense of self-worth. Because for someone who had always measured his self-worth by the applause of others,
You see, That's the biggest problem. To measure your self-worth by something on the outside. That's why I'm creating the program Inner Freedom, because it stems from within. It's never from without. If we wait for the outside to change, we're going to always be dependent on the outside. On the other hand, think about that. I have a friend who tries to solve her problems, anxietal problems, by doing sports. Yeah, it seems great in practice. Yeah, sports helps a lot, but she overtrains and now she can't walk because she has pain in her foot. First of all, resolve the problem on the inside, because the problem is in the inside. You cannot solve it on the outside by doing stuff.
What did it mean for that applause to suddenly stop? Who was he without the power, without the spotlight? Roosevelt, like many successful people, fell victim to the comparison trap. He ingrained the habit of comparing himself to others, mostly because he was so used to winning. But when that winning stopped, that comparison trap turned against him, and he quickly felt empty. Under this dark cloud, Roosevelt did what he always did. He took action. He declared war, but this time it wasn't a war against a foreign power or a corrupt political machine. It was a war against the emptiness inside him, an existential fight to matter again. So he did something reckless. He signed on for an expedition to chart an uncharted river in the Amazon, a river so dangerous that the local tribes called it the River of Doubt. No maps, no guarantee of survival, no reason except for one, to prove that he was still someone worth remembering. The result? Well, it was predictably catastrophic. Roosevelt contracted malaria, he lost 50 pounds, he had infected wounds that left him writhing in fever. He was so weak that at one point, he begged to be left behind to die. Because in his words, at least it would be a heroic death. But in the end, his own son fought to keep him alive and physically dragged him out of the jungle and back to civilization. And here's what's so fucked up about all this. Most of us, to some degree, do the same thing every day.
Yes.
We fall into the trap of measuring our lives against other people's metrics, their followers, their promotions, their milestones, and we do this stupid self-defeating shit as a result. It's easy to fall into a comparison trap when you're winning because it feels good.
Yeah, exactly.
But be careful not to get stuck there, because eventually, when the tides turn, everyone loses at something. And if you've trained yourself to live by the standards of others, that loss will end up feeling catastrophic. But not as catastrophic as this next historical figure. In 1969, Buzz Aldrin did what billions could only dream of. He walked on the moon. He was the second human to ever set foot on another world. And when he came back down, he was immortal. We're talking parades, medals, applause in every corner of the earth. But what nobody talks about is what came after that.
If you want to work one-on-one, I'm available for one spot. And I have a new book. You can check it out. But yeah, I remember that. Let's continue.
For Aldrin, the moon wasn't just an accomplishment. It was the accomplishment. Nothing he would ever do in his life would ever compare to it. There was no next mission, no bigger goal, no peak to climb. The highest high was behind him, and it broke him in ways no one in the public could see. Aldrin spiraled into depression and alcoholism. He torpedoed multiple marriages. He blew.
People say that it happened because he was feeling guilty for not telling the truth. I don't know.
Through all of his money. At one point, the man who had stood on the lunar surface was selling Cadillacs in Beverly Hills, trying to convince strangers to buy a car.
Okay, nothing wrong with selling Cadillacs.
When he had driven a spaceship on the fucking moon. He later wrote that after the moon, Earth felt impossible for him to navigate. Because, I mean, how do you follow up the impossible? Athletes often face a similar effect when they're forced to retire. Artists do when the muse goes silent. Soldiers when the war ends. They stand on their own personal moon and then they come back down to Earth and the Earth just feels small. But here's a harsh truth. We're not wired to enjoy our peak accomplishments, or at least not for long. We're wired to chase the next accomplishment.
Yes,
but
that's
when you
true.
can't imagine what the next accomplishment is because the last one was so big and so important, you drift and then self-destruct. You don't get lost because you're weak. You get lost because you don't know what's ahead anymore. Which brings us to the sponsor of this video. Doing this to himself over tea like a good old Englishman, he wrote out the pros and cons like a neurotic college student. On the one side, you had the pros to marrying. children, if it please God, a constant companion, and an object to be beloved and play with. Better than a dog anyhow. Yeah, he actually wrote that his wife was better than a dog. On the other side, the pros to not getting married. Freedom to go wherever I like. Conversation of clever men at clubs, and not forced to visit relatives. Dude, I hear you on that last one. So yeah, here was a man capable of reshaping our entire understanding of where life came from on Earth, and he was totally ordinary as fuck. What Darwin was struggling with was painfully simple. In front of him, he could see the possibility of two good lives, and the fact that both seemed good is actually what paralyzed him. After all, when every option seems good, how do you know which one is better?
Yeah.
It turns out that this analysis paralysis is a relatively modern phenomenon. It's born out of the same problem that Darwin struggled with, having too many good options. In science, this is known as the paradox of choice. The more good options you have, the more stressed and unhappy you become, not because you don't know what the best option is.
Yeah, I'll also say that it's also about values. You know, when you have two competing values, like for example, in my case, the value of family and the value of freedom, and if you want both of them, it's very hard to put them together and to choose, because sometimes you have to choose a way of life, you know. So that's something that cost me a lot of pain, and still I'm searching for a great solution.
But because you're forced to give up so many other seemingly good options too. It's that pain of giving up what could be that ends up outweighing the benefit of whatever is. This version of feeling lost is in many ways the highest quality problem you can have. Oh, boo-hoo, you can summer in Milan and take a taxidermy course in Japan. Oh, boo-hoo, you have 3 job offers and 6 hotties who want to date you at once. Whatever shall you do? But seriously, this can actually be kind of crippling. Take it from me. In the face of an abundance of options, they can all begin to feel meaningless. And paradoxically, the only way to feel less loss is to limit yourself, to close a lot of the potential doors, to choose a single one and commit yourself to it, knowing that you're giving up a lot on the way. Now, that giving up may hurt at first, but it is that limitation that you impose on yourself that actually makes it feel meaningful. Darwin did marry, by the way. He chose to shut all the other doors in his life. And from that stable home life came the consistency that he needed to write the work that would outlive him for centuries. See, constraint actually creates clarity. It's not the freedom to do everything that sets you free. It's the courage to say, this is what I care about, and not that.
Yeah, that's about choosing the most valuable thing to you. It's not about giving that away, but it's about choosing what you want, you know. That's true freedom.
That does. What do we make of all this? If you're feeling lost right now, what's the takeaway here? I mean, Abraham Lincoln led a nation through its darkest hour while battling a storm in his own heart. Carl Jung rebuilt meaning from the fragments of madness. Theodore Roosevelt tried to outrun his own irrelevance and nearly died in the Amazon. Buzz Aldrin touched the heavens only to fall in a hole no one else could see. And Charles Darwin, bro had commitment issues. What these stories show us is that feeling lost isn't a weakness or a failure. It's part of what it means to be human, especially in a world without blueprints or an obvious roadmap. When you feel lost, the process is relatively simple, but emotionally difficult. Number 1, you try something, anything, and look for that inspiration. Look for what's next, like Jung did. 2, once you find that something and that feels meaningful, cut off the other options and distractions and commit to it, like Darwin did. And 3, once you're committed to it, avoid the traps of comparing it to what others may think, like Roosevelt, and definitely don't compare it to your past successes, like Aldrin. And finally, 4, sometimes, like Lincoln, you just have to force yourself out of bed and get on with it. So why don't you get on with it and watch more videos? Like this one.
Oh my god, Mark, why telling people to watch more videos? Yeah, okay, we know, we get it. So guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate you, every one of you watching with me, sticking with me till the end, because I'm doing these commentary videos that I enjoy making, because it helps me also with clarity, and I think that it can also bring you some clarity, so that you can have someone to talk to while watching videos and I like that, you know. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next episode. Yeah.